And that's what starts cardiovascular disease or atherosclerosis, which
So someone that's struggling with their nitric oxide levels at the moment, what kind of symptoms would they experience?
well, we know there's a hierarchy, right? So the first sign and symptom of nitric oxide deficiency is usually erectile dysfunction. And when you think about this, when we're stimulated or we're about to have intimacy with our partner, we have to dilate the blood vessels. So in erections in both men and women are dependent upon dilation of the blood vessels to get engorgement, to get increase in blood flow, and that's what an erection is. But if those blood vessels can't make nitric oxide, the blood vessels don't dilate, so there's no increase in blood flow, there's no engorgement, and that's by definition what we call erectile dysfunction. And it's the same in men and women, right? Whether it's the penis or the clitoris or the labia, you have to have an increase in blood flow. And without nitric oxide, there's no increase in blood flow. So that's number one. And we call that the canary in the coal mine, because for years people thought it was a lifestyle disorder, right?
What, erectile dysfunction?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But now it's recognized that it's a symptom of loss of nitric oxide and really an accelerated form of cardiovascular disease. So we have to focus on the vascular component of erectile dysfunction.
What other diseases are linked to nitric oxide?
Deficiency. So if you don't correct the ED, then what you start to see is an increase in blood pressure. And when you think about this mechanistically, so we have, a finite volume of blood that's pumping throughout our body every day, every second. And if you can make nitric oxide, the blood vessels are more dilated. So now we're pumping that volume through, more dilated blood vessels. But if we lose the ability to produce nitric oxide, now you don't get the dilation. Now you have smaller blood vessels. You're pumping that same volume of blood through smaller pipes, and simple physics tells us that blood pressure goes up.
Okay, so you're going to have cardiovascular challenges potentially.
Well, you're going to have high blood pressure or hypertension. And at least in the US, and I think these statistics probably are worldwide, but 2 out of 3 Americans have an unsafe elevation in blood pressure. And 50% of the people that are given prescription medications to treat their blood pressure do not respond with better blood pressure. It's because most of the drugs out there, whether they're ACE inhibitors, what's called angiotensin receptor blockers, calcium channel antagonists, the main classes of drugs that treat high blood pressure aren't targeted toward restoration of nitric oxide. So that's why we call that resistant hypertension. They're resistant to traditional therapies. And the reason they're resistant is because it's a nitric oxide problem. And those drugs aren't designed to affect nitric oxide production or improve it.
Was there an aha moment in your career where you became particularly interested in this subject? Because you could have committed your life to studying any facet of health or science, but for some reason you chose nitric oxide as the thing that you chose to focus on. What was that eureka moment?
For me, I was a student at LSU School of Medicine. This was the late 90s, maybe early 2000s. But a Nobel Prize had just been awarded for the discovery of nitric oxide. There were 3 U.S. scientists that were awarded the Nobel Prize in physiology or medicine in 1998. And I was very fortunate at the time. I was a young student, probably a first-year student, and Lou Ignarro, who had just won the Nobel Prize for the discovery of nitric oxide, came and spoke and gave a lecture before the student body. And I had a chance to have a conversation with him afterwards, and I was fortunate to be invited to have dinner with him that night. And he made a very poignant statement to me. He goes, if the scientific community can figure out how to restore the production of nitric oxide, it'll change the world. And it'll change the landscape of medicine. Because even then, what is that, 25, 26 years ago, that it was recognized that a loss of nitric oxide production is leading to the onset and development of many poorly managed age-related chronic diseases. So I go, that's a very profound statement from a guy who just won the Nobel Prize. But that was the first kind of eureka moment for me that stimulated the interest. But then my dad, and I talk about it in the book, dad is 76 years old. In 1984, he had a car accident. It left him paralyzed from the mid-back down. So the majority of my life, even as a kid, I was treating Dad's wounds, decubitus ulcers, pressure ulcers on his feet, on his butt. And he developed these non-healing wounds. He was diabetic, he was paraplegic, poor blood flow, hypertension, and he developed a non-healing wound, and no wound care doc that I took him to could heal this wound. So I started making a topical nitric oxide, and I've healed this wound within a period of 4 years of non-healing. I healed it within 6 months, simply by giving nitric oxide and getting blood flow to that wound, killing the infection in the wound. And this was in a 60-something-year-old paraplegic, diabetic, sedentary old man.
what you went through as a young man, to me, appears to be such an important sort of through line with all the work that you do and chose to do. There is this overarching question, which is even like, why did you go into medicine? Why did you
Yeah.
want to help people? Where did that come from in you? And I feel like there's clues in that to some degree based on
Yeah.
what I read about your family, your early upbringing, the divorce of your parents, and then ultimately your dad getting in a car accident and being paralyzed. Is that an accurate suspicion?
Certainly it directed kind of my life because I witnessed the failure of the standard of care to treat dad with what I thought should be pretty simple. I mean, we have, again, the most advanced technology, medical technology, best medical schools in the world, and yet we can't treat a wound. We can't address the hypertension. We can't address the diabetes medically. And so I just thought that there had to be a better way.
It's still with you now, isn't it?
Yeah, but I see, Dad, when I think I'm having a bad day, I just think, look, I'm not in a wheelchair. I got my health. So no matter how bad I think I got it, I go, it could always be worse. So I just wake up every day with a grateful heart. And, some days are good, some days are bad, but I always realize it could always be better, but it could be a hell of a lot worse. So I don't complain.
And who are you? What are all the reference points? What's the experience you've had in your career that have filled up your sort of buckets of knowledge that you bring forth today? Like, what have you studied? Where have you been?
I was in molecular and cellular physiology, got a PhD in molecular and cellular physiology, and I was recruited by Fred Murad, one of the other guys who shared the Nobel Prize, to join the faculty at the University of Texas Health Science Center in Houston, which is the world's largest medical center, but it's part of the University of Texas system. So I was recruited as a professor of molecular medicine, published probably, over 100 peer-reviewed scientific publications. I've edited several medical textbooks on the subject. I taught in medical school. And then I resigned from academia, I guess, several years ago during COVID to focus on the next phase of my career, is taking this 25 years of science and research and discovery and now bringing that to the fore for safe and effective product technology, drug therapies, to eradicate a lot of these poorly managed chronic diseases that, we're faced with today.
So let me get this straight. I'll repeat back to you what I think I understand about nitric oxide, and you tell me if it's accurate. So this nitric oxide is a chemical that is in all the blood cells of my body, and it allows my blood cells to basically expand, open up, so blood can flow through there. So if
it dilates the smooth muscle. So it's not affecting the
blood
cells
vessel
per se, but it's dilating the smooth muscle that surrounds the blood vessels,
which
and
is
that leads to
causing
relaxation and dilation.
fine. So my blood cells would then expand,
Your blood vessels,
and more blood would go through there. But if I'm deficient, that mechanism doesn't work, and my blood cells wouldn't ultimately expand through the relaxation of the muscles.
That's right.
And therefore, I would have higher blood pressure, which can lead to a series of downstream diseases and consequences. And so when we look at the graph that I showed a second ago, where we're seeing, for anyone that can't see this graph because you're listening on audio, we're seeing nitric oxide levels in young people up to the age of roughly around 20 are optimal. And then from about 30 to 70, there's this tremendous sort of 80, 90% drop. When I look at that graph, though, my question becomes,